One minute, I was celebrating my dream university acceptance. The next, I was staring at a bank balance of 74 or 32s, a chilling testament to my father's secret life. The email arrived on a Tuesday, shimmering like a digital mirage in my crowded inbox. "Congratulations," the subject line screamed in bold blue letters. My heart did a frantic little drum solo against my ribs. This was it. The culmination of 4 years of sleepless nights, AP classes that felt like intellectual warfare, and a social life that was more theory than practice. The university of my dreams, my ticket out, my key to the future, everything I had ever worked for, all condensed into a single pixelated acceptance letter. I screamed, a raw, joyous sound that brought my mom running into my room, dish towel still in her hand. When she saw the screen, she screamed too. We jumped up and down, a whirlwind of tearful hugs and happy shrieks. Dad heard the commotion from his home office and appeared in the doorway, a wide, proud grin spreading across his face. "I knew you could do it, champ," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he pulled me into a bear hug that smelled of coffee and success. That night, we celebrated. Mom made my favorite pasta, and Dad opened a bottle of fancy champagne he'd been saving. We toasted to my future, to our family, to the bright, beautiful road that stretched out before me. My dad looked at me over the rim of his glass, his eyes shining. "Everything we've done," he said, his gaze sweeping over my mom, our perfect suburban home, "it's all been for this. For you." I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. I was so loved, so supported. I was the luckiest girl in the world. The next morning, high on the fumes of victory and parental pride, I logged into the university's student portal. There were forms to fill out, orientation dates to select, and the first big tangible step, paying the housing deposit. A cool $5,000 to secure my spot in the dorms. No problem. My college fund, the one my parents had started for me when I was born, was waiting. It was a joint account in my name and my dad's, a symbol of trust and our shared investment in my future. It was more than just their money. It was my life savings from every birthday check from my grandma, every dollar I'd painstakingly saved from my part-time barista job. All of it, pooled together into a healthy sum that would see me through my first year without a single worry. I navigated to my online banking app, my fingers tapping excitedly on the screen. I put in the password, watched the little circle spin, and then my breath caught in my throat. I blinked, sure that I was seeing things. The number on the screen couldn't be right. It was supposed to be a robust 5-figure number, a comfortable cushion for tuition, books, and a new life. Instead, the balance displayed was a pitiful $74.30. $74. That wouldn't even cover the application fee for student housing, let alone the deposit. A cold, sick feeling washed over me, chasing away the last vestiges of yesterday's warmth. It had to be a mistake, a glitch in the system, a transfer that hadn't cleared yet. Panicked, I clicked on the transaction history, my heart thumping a frantic, fearful rhythm against my sternum. I scrolled down, expecting to see a large, recent transfer to a savings account or some other logical explanation. Instead, what I found was a slow, methodical bleed. It started 6 months ago. Small withdrawals at first. $100 here, $200 there. Then they got bigger. $500, $1,000. The descriptions were vague. ATM withdrawal, online transfer. But then about 3 months back, a pattern emerged. Venmo payments, dozens of them, all to the same person. A name I'd never heard before, Chloe Renault. The payments were for thousands of dollars at a time. The memos attached were sickeningly sweet. For our future. A little something for my girl. Can't wait to see you. The world tilted on its axis. My dad's words from last night echoed in my mind. Everything we've done, it's all been for this. For me or for Chloe? The air in my room felt thick, unbreathable. I was no longer an excited college-bound kid. I was a detective at the scene of a devastating crime, and the victim was my own future. My hands were shaking, but a cold, hard resolve was solidifying in my gut. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal. I didn't cry. The shock was too deep, the anger too profound. I spent the rest of the day in a fugue state, methodically gathering evidence. I downloaded every single bank statement, highlighting each transfer to Chloe. I did a little digging online. It wasn't hard to find her. Her social media was public. Chloe Renaud was a yoga instructor, about 10 years younger than my mom, with long blonde hair and a feed full of exotic travel photos and expensive-looking brunches. Photos that corresponded with the dates of my dad's business trips. The trip to a conference in Miami was a week of sun-drenched selfies from Chloe in South Beach. The sales retreat in Aspen was a series of Chloe's posts from a ski lodge, complete with a picture of 2 glasses of champagne by a fireplace, captioned, "So spoiled by my man." My college fund hadn't just been spent, it had been used to finance a double life. That evening, I set the dining room table for 3, just like always. I placed the linen napkins and the good silverware. When my parents came to the table, my mom humming a cheerful tune, my dad loosening his tie, I was sitting there, perfectly still. In front of my place setting was a neatly arranged stack of papers. "What's all this, honey?" my mom asked, smiling. "More college paperwork?" "Sort of," I said, my voice eerily calm. I pushed the first set of papers across the table toward my dad. It was the bank statements, with Chloe's name highlighted in bright, angry yellow. I watched his face as he looked at them. The color drained from his cheeks. His confident, proud father smile evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure panic. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and pleading. My mom was looking back and forth between us, her smile faltering, confusion clouding her features. "Lily, what is this?" she asked. Before I could answer, my dad spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Lily, please. Let's not do this here. We can talk about this later, just us." "There is no just us anymore, Dad," I said, my voice like ice. "You made sure of that." His face crumpled. He reached across the table, his hand trembling, trying to take mine. "Please," he begged, his eyes filling with tears, "don't ruin our family." I pulled my hand back and looked him dead in the eye. "Ruin our family?" I said, my voice low and shaking with a fury I didn't know I possessed. "You did that. You did. With our shared bank account." I let the words hang in the air, a guillotine over the perfect family portrait we were pretending to be. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, a small gasp escaping her lips as she finally started to understand. But I wasn't finished. Oh, I was far from finished. This was just the appetizer. I reached for the second stack of papers I had printed. "You think this is just about the money, don't you?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You think this is just about some affair you funded with my future?" I slid the next paper across the polished wood of the table. It was a property record I'd found on the county clerk's website, a down payment receipt for a condo on the other side of the city, a condo purchased 2 months ago under 2 names, his and Chloe Renaud's. His head fell into his hands, a choked sob escaping him. My mom was now openly weeping, but that still wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was the final page I'd printed out, the one I'd been holding under the table. I placed it squarely in the center for them both to see. It was a screenshot from Chloe's private Instagram, sent to me by a sympathetic friend of a friend I'd messaged. The picture showed her smiling, a radiant, happy glow on her face, her hand resting protectively on a very visible baby bump. The caption underneath it read, "The greatest gift. Can't wait to meet our little one in December." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so profound you could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the frantic, terrified thumping of my own heart. The screenshot lay on the table like a grenade with the pin pulled. My mom stared at it, her face a frozen mask of disbelief. Her eyes traced the curve of Chloe's belly, the joyful caption, the date, December. She did the math in her head. I could see the calculation flicker behind her eyes, followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated horror. A single choked sob broke from her throat, a sound so full of pain it felt like a physical blow. My dad finally moved. He didn't look at the picture. He couldn't. He just stared at me, his face a mess of tears and desperation. "Lily, no," he whispered, shaking his head as if he could physically deny the reality I'd just laid bare. "Please, don't do this." "Do what?" My voice was shockingly steady. "Show you a picture? Or tell the truth?" That's when my mom snapped. The grief-stricken wife was gone, replaced by a woman I'd never seen before. Her back straightened, and the look she gave my father could have curdled milk. "Mark," she said, her voice dangerously low, "look at me." He flinched but slowly, reluctantly dragged his gaze from me to her. "Is this true?" "Diane, it's complicated," he stammered, running a hand through his hair. "I was going to tell you. I was trying to find the right time." "The right time?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "The right time to tell me you've drained our daughter's college fund, bought a love nest with your mistress, and knocked her up? When exactly were you planning on slotting that into our family calendar, between PTA meetings and our anniversary dinner?" He withered under her fury. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I love you. I love this family." "You love this family?" I scoffed, unable to stay silent. "Which part? The part where you stole my savings? Or the part where you built a second secret family on the side?" "It's not like that," he insisted, his voice rising in desperation. He turned back to my mom, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Chloe, she's not you. What we have is real. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake." My mom just laughed, a bitter, broken sound that held no humor. "A mistake? Mark, a mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. A mistake is buying the wrong kind of bread. You don't accidentally mortgage your daughter's future and father a child with a yoga instructor." The fight was a blur of accusations and pathetic excuses. He cried, he begged, he said all the things I imagine cheating husbands say, that it meant nothing, that he was weak, that he didn't want to lose us. Through it all, I sat in my chair, a silent judge presiding over the complete and utter demolition of my childhood. He had built this life, this perfect-looking family, and I was watching him tear it down, beam by beam, with his lies. At some point, he seemed to realize my mom was a lost cause for the moment. Her face was set in stone, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. So he turned his attention back to me, the architect of his immediate misery. His eyes were red-rimmed and pleading. "Lilybug," he said, using a nickname he hadn't called me in years. It felt like acid in my ears. "Help me. Talk to your mother. Tell her we can fix this. We can get through this. We're a family." I just stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me, the person he had betrayed most directly, to be his mediator. He wanted me to sweep my own stolen future under the rug to help him glue the pieces of his shattered marriage back together. "There is no we anymore," I said, my voice flat. "You have your new family to worry about now. You should be more concerned with saving for their kids' college fund." "The condo was an investment," he blurted out, latching onto a tangible detail in a sea of emotional chaos. "For us, for our future, it's an asset." My mom looked at him, a tiny, insane flicker of hope in her eyes. It was pathetic, but I understood it. The desperate, dying wish that there was some logical, albeit twisted explanation for all of this, that he hadn't just thrown their whole life away. "An investment?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," he said, seizing the lifeline, "to build our portfolio, for our retirement." I almost smiled. It was the worst lie he'd told all night. I looked from his desperate, sweating face to my mother's, watching that fragile hope begin to take root. I couldn't let that happen. She deserved the whole, unvarnished truth. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. "An investment for your retirement?" I asked, my voice calm and clear, cutting through his babbling. I turned my gaze to my mom. "Mom," I said gently, forcing her to look at me, to see the pity and the hard truth in my eyes. "Did you know he took out a second mortgage on this house to pay for it?" The air sucked out of the room. My dad's desperate, lying words hung there, completely neutered. My mom's face, which had held that pathetic flicker of hope, went utterly blank. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on me. It was as if I'd spoken in a foreign language and she was trying to translate the monstrous meaning behind my words. A second mortgage. Those two words were more devastating than affair, more brutal than baby. The affair was a betrayal of her heart. The second mortgage was a betrayal of their entire life together, of the very foundation, the literal foundation they had built. "No," she whispered. It wasn't a question or a denial. It was the sound of a final crumbling wall. "No, he wouldn't." "He would, Mom. He did," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "About 3 months ago. I found the paperwork in his desk this afternoon when I was looking for the college fund statements. It's all there. He forged your signature." My dad made a sound, a strangled, guttural noise, like an animal caught in a trap. He slumped back in his chair, all the fight gone out of him. He knew he was caught. There were no more lies to tell, no more corners to hide in. The truth was out, stark and ugly, illuminated by the warm, homey glow of our dining room chandelier. He had not only stolen from my future, he had gambled with my mother's present, leveraging their shared home, their sanctuary, for his sordid little side project. My mom slowly stood up. She moved like an old woman, her joints stiff with shock. She didn't scream or cry. She walked around the table, her footsteps unnaturally loud on the hardwood floor. She stopped directly in front of him. He wouldn't look at her. He just stared down at his hands, which were clenched into white-knuckled fists on the table. "Get out," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it held the unyielding finality of a judge's sentence. "Diane, please," he whimpered, looking up at her. His face was a wreck. "Don't do this. Where will I go?" "I imagine you'll go to your investment property," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Go to Chloe. Go to your new baby. Go to hell for all I care. But you will not spend another night in my house." He started to protest, to beg again, but she held up a hand. "If you are not out of this house in 1 hour, Mark, I will call the police. I will tell them you forged my signature on a legal document. It's called bank fraud. You can explain your investments to them." That was it. The final nail. The threat was real, and he knew it. He stood up, defeated. He didn't even look at me. It was as if I'd ceased to exist. I was just the catalyst, the bomb that had finally gone off. He shuffled out of the dining room, and we heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. My mom stood there for a long moment, her back to me, her shoulders shaking silently. Then she turned, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes clear and resolute. "Lily," she said, her voice trembling but strong, "we're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But as the sound of my father packing a suitcase echoed from upstairs, all I could think about was the $74.32 in my college account and the $5,000 housing deposit that was due in 3 weeks. We weren't okay. We were broke. Our house was in jeopardy, and my future was a giant, terrifying question mark. The next few days were a blur of lawyers and frantic phone calls. My mom, a woman who once balanced the PTA budget and organized neighborhood bake sales, transformed into a warrior. She met with a divorce attorney who looked like a shark in a pinstripe suit. They froze what little was left in their joint accounts. She contacted the bank about the fraudulent second mortgage. It was a messy, ugly, soul-crushing process. My dad, in the meantime, had officially moved in with Chloe. He texted me once, a pathetic string of words about how sorry he was and how he would make it right. I deleted it without responding. Through it all, the deadline for my housing deposit loomed. I tried to apply for emergency financial aid, but the process was slow and convoluted. I was still technically a dependent of two married upper-middle-class parents. On paper, I didn't need help. In reality, I was watching my dreams slip through my fingers like sand. One night, I found my mom at the kitchen table, surrounded by a mountain of bills, her head in her hands. "I can't make it work," she whispered, her voice raw with exhaustion. "The lawyer's retainer, the mortgage payments. Lily, I am so sorry. I don't know how we're going to pay for your deposit." A cold dread settled in my stomach. It wasn't her fault. None of this was her fault. It was his. And as I looked at my mother's defeated face, a new kind of anger started to burn within me. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of that first night. This was a cold, calculating fury. He wasn't going to get away with this. He wasn't going to destroy two families and just walk away to start his shiny new life. He wanted to make it right? Fine. I was going to give him the chance. The next day, I did something I never thought I would do. I found Chloe Renaud's phone number. It wasn't hard. It was listed on her yoga studio's website. My hand was shaking as I dialed, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. She answered on the second ring, her voice as smooth and serene as her Instagram photos. "Namaste. You've reached Chloe," she said. I took a deep breath. "Chloe," I said, my voice hard as stone. "My name is Lily. We haven't met, but you're living with my father, sleeping in a condo bought with my college tuition, and carrying his child. I think it's time we had a little chat." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost picture her, frozen mid-lunge in some overpriced yoga pants, her serene mask cracking. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its zen-like calm. It was sharp, defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about. I think you have the wrong number." "Oh, I have the right number, Chloe," I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness. "And you know exactly who I am. Does the name Mark sound familiar? About 6'1", salt and pepper hair, penchant for lying and stealing from his own daughter?" "You shouldn't be calling me," she snapped. "This is between your parents." "It was between my parents until you started accepting Venmo payments from my college fund," I shot back. "It became my business when my father used the money meant for my education to put a down payment on your love nest. And it got really personal when I found out he was financing your organic prenatal vitamins while my mom is figuring out how to keep the lights on." I heard a sharp intake of breath. I had her. She could pretend all she wanted, but she was a direct beneficiary of my stolen future. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low and hostile. "I want to meet," I said simply. "Just you and me, no dads, no lawyers. Let's say the coffee shop on Main Street. Tomorrow at 10, we have a lot to discuss about your financial arrangements." "I'm not meeting you," she said quickly. Too quickly. "I think you will," I said, my voice turning to ice. "Because if you don't, my next call is to a friend of mine whose mother is a reporter for the local news. The story of a prominent local businessman who defrauded his wife, stole his daughter's college fund to support his pregnant mistress. Well, that's a pretty juicy human interest piece, don't you think? It would be a real shame if your yoga studio's reputation got caught in the crossfire. All that bad energy could be terrible for business." The silence on her end was thick with rage and calculation. I had backed her into a corner, and we both knew it. "Fine," she finally spat out. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. But if you think—" I hung up before she could finish her threat. I felt a dizzying mix of terror and triumph. I had no idea what I was going to do or say, but I knew I couldn't just sit by and watch my life implode. I had poked the she-bear. Now I had to face her. The next morning, I walked into the coffee shop feeling like a soldier heading into battle. I spotted her immediately. She was sitting in a corner booth trying to look casual as she scrolled through her phone. In person, she was smaller than I expected, but she radiated an aura of expensive wellness. Even her maternity top was some kind of designer, flowing silk that draped perfectly over her bump. The bump. Seeing it in person sent a jolt through me. It was real, undeniably real. That was my half-sibling, a child who was going to have a father while I had effectively lost mine. I slid into the booth opposite her. She looked up, her blue eyes cold and appraising. She didn't offer a greeting. "You're brave, I'll give you that," she said, putting her phone down. "I'm not brave, I'm desperate," I replied, meeting her gaze. "And you're the one who cashed the checks." A flicker of something guilt, annoyance, crossed her face. "Look, I'm sorry about your situation. I truly am. But Mark told me that money was from his savings. He said he was investing in our future." "Our future," I repeated, my voice flat. "Did he also tell you he forged my mom's signature on a second mortgage to pay for your condo? Or was that just another part of his investment portfolio?" Her composure finally broke. Her eyes widened and a flush crept up her neck. "He what?" she whispered. "Oh, so he left that part out," I said, a bitter satisfaction welling up inside me. "You see, Chloe, you think you've hit the jackpot with a successful older man who's going to take care of you and your baby. But the man you're with is a liar and a thief. The foundation of your new life is built on my stolen future and my mother's compromised security. How long do you think that's going to last before he does the same thing to you?" She stared at me, her mind clearly racing, connecting the dots. She was seeing the cracks in the perfect picture he had painted for her. "He wouldn't," she said, but it sounded weak, uncertain. "Wouldn't he?" I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's about to be in the middle of a very expensive divorce. The bank is investigating him for fraud. He has no savings left. That man has nothing, Chloe. Nothing but a mountain of debt and a trail of wreckage. You and your baby aren't his bright new future. You're just his latest and most expensive liability." I let the words sink in, watching the color drain from her face. She was smart. I could see her piecing it together, realizing the precariousness of her own situation. She wasn't a homewrecker who had won. She was just the next victim. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked, her voice trembling slightly. "It's simple," I said, my plan crystallizing in that moment, cold and clear. "You're going to get my money back." I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of my university's payment portal, showing the $5,000 deposit required. "This is due in 2 weeks. You're going to convince Mark to pay it. I don't care how. I don't care if you have to sell that stupid designer handbag or pawn a piece of jewelry he bought you with my money. You are going to fix this part of the mess he made." She looked at the paper and then back at me, a defiant spark in her eyes. "And why would I do that?" I leaned back, giving her a small, cold smile. "Because right now I'm angry, but I'm also pragmatic. If I get my deposit paid, I can go to college, and I will be out of your hair. But if that deadline passes and my admission is rescinded, well, desperate people do desperate things." I let the threat hang in the air. "I've only spoken to my mother's divorce lawyer so far, but I haven't yet mentioned the baby or the condo. She thinks he just had an affair and spent some money. The second mortgage was a shock, but this..." I gestured vaguely toward her stomach. "This would be her nuclear option, and I will give her all the ammunition she needs to make sure he, and by extension, you are left with absolutely nothing. I will make it my life's mission to become the ghost that haunts your perfect new family, so you can help me get to college, or you can prepare for a war you have no idea how to fight." Her face was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. She looked from me to her belly, a flicker of primal maternal fear in her eyes. She was trapped. She had tied her future to a sinking ship, and I was the only one offering her a life raft, albeit a very small, very selfish one. "He's coming over tonight," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll talk to him." "You won't just talk to him," I said, standing up. "You'll get it done." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, leaving her alone in the booth with the bill and the ruins of her 5-star future. My heart was pounding, my body buzzing with adrenaline. I didn't know if my bluff would work. I didn't know if he even had $5,000 left to his name. All I knew was that I had fired my last shot. Now all I could do was wait. The next 2 days were agonizing. I checked my email every 5 minutes, my stomach twisting into a tighter knot each time. Nothing. I didn't hear from Chloe. I didn't hear from my dad. The silence was deafening. My mom was trying to be brave, researching student loans and talking about community college as a backup plan, but I could see the heartbreak in her eyes. On the 3rd day, I had given up hope. I was sitting on my bed staring at the withdrawal page for my university, my finger hovering over the button when my phone buzzed. It was an email. Not from Chloe, not from my dad, but from the university bursar's office. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open it. The subject line read, "Payment confirmation." My breath hitched. I clicked it open. "Dear Lily," it began, "we are pleased to confirm that we have received a payment of $5,000 for your student housing deposit. Your place for the upcoming academic year is now secure. Welcome to the university." A wire transfer. It had been paid. A wave of relief so intense it almost made me sick washed over me. I had done it. My bluff had worked. I was going to college. I let out a sob, a mixture of joy and pure, unadulterated exhaustion. Just then, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Don't think this is over." The voice was low, seething with a rage that sent a chill down my spine. It was my father. "You went behind my back. You threatened her. You threatened my child." "I did what I had to do," I said, my newfound relief solidifying back into cold anger. "You left me no choice." "You've made a powerful enemy today, Lily," he hissed. "You have no idea what you've just started." "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "You started this. I'm just finishing it." I hung up the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had won the battle, but his words echoed in my mind. What had I started? What else could he possibly do? I had my tuition deposit, but the rest of the bill for the semester, a cool $20,000, was due in August. I looked at the calendar. It was 2 months away. I had secured my spot, but I was still a long way from the finish line, and I had the terrifying feeling that my father was going to make sure I never crossed it. That's when I noticed a second email had come through while I was on the phone. It was from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was just one word: proof. I opened it. Attached was a grainy photo clearly taken from a distance. It showed my mother walking into her lawyer's office building. But she wasn't alone. Walking beside her, his hand resting gently on the small of her back, was my father's business partner, Richard. The photo hit me like a physical punch to the gut. Richard, my dad's business partner, the man I'd known my whole life as Uncle Richard. He and my dad had built their marketing firm from the ground up, working out of our garage in the early days. He was at every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, a fixture in the architecture of my family. And there he was, his hand on my mother's back, a gesture of quiet intimacy and support that felt like a profound betrayal. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. The email was from an anonymous, encrypted address. The message was clear. My father was watching. This wasn't just a random photo. It was a warning shot, a piece of leverage. "You think you have the moral high ground? Think again." My first instinct was rage. How could my mom do this? But the anger quickly dissolved into a complicated wave of empathy. My father had shattered her world. Richard had been there to help her pick up the pieces, both personally and professionally. He was a co-owner of the firm. My dad's implosion directly affected his livelihood too. Was it an affair? Or just a friend offering support to another friend in crisis? The photo was ambiguous, but the implication my father wanted me to draw was not. He was trying to muddy the waters, to paint my mother with the same brush he was tarred with, to isolate me. For a moment, it almost worked. A sick feeling churned in my stomach. But then I looked again at the email, at the single-word subject line: Proof. Proof of what? My father's desperation. This was the move of a cornered animal. He couldn't fight me on the facts. He stole the money, he had the affair, he fathered the child. So he was resorting to emotional warfare. He wanted me to turn on my mom, to destroy the only alliance I had left, and I wasn't going to let him. I deleted the email and the photo, erasing it from my phone as if to erase the poison it contained. My mom and I never talked about Richard. I saw them together a few times over the next month, poring over company financials at our kitchen table, their heads bent close together in concentration. I saw the way he looked at her, with a respect and kindness my father hadn't shown her in years. And I decided, for my own sanity, that it wasn't my business. My business was the remaining $20,000 I needed for my first semester's tuition. My dad's threat had lit a fire under me. He thought he could intimidate me, but all he did was strengthen my resolve. I wasn't just going to college to fulfill my dream anymore. I was going as an act of defiance. I worked every shift I could get at the coffee shop. I applied for every scholarship I could find, writing essays until my fingers were numb. My mom cashed in some old savings bonds she'd been given by her grandmother. We scraped and saved, and by the end of July, we had amassed a little over $10,000. It was an incredible effort, but it was still only halfway. The deadline was 2 weeks away. The pressure was immense. One evening, Richard was over, and he and my mom were working late at the table. I was in the living room, ostensibly doing homework, but really just staring at the tuition portal, the massive number mocking me. I must have made a sound of frustration because Richard looked over. "Everything okay, Lily?" he asked, his voice gentle. I just shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. My mom came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure it out, honey. We always do." But I knew we were out of options. Time was up. Richard looked from me to my mom, then back at the mountain of paperwork on the dining table. "Diane," he said quietly, "can I talk to you for a moment? About the buyout?" My ears perked up. Buyout? My mom followed him back to the table, and they started talking in low voices. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught phrases like dissolving the partnership, company assets, and severance offer. A plan was being discussed, a final move in the chess game. A week later, my mom called a meeting. She, Richard, their respective lawyers, and I all gathered in a sterile conference room at the attorney's office. My dad was there too. He looked terrible. The confident, successful man I once knew was gone, replaced by a haggard, stressed-out stranger. Chloe wasn't with him. He sat slumped in his chair, refusing to meet my eyes. Richard and his lawyer laid it out. My dad's actions, the fraud, the potential for public scandal, had put the firm at risk. Richard was exercising a clause in their partnership agreement to buy my father out. They had valued the company, and Richard was offering a lump sum for my father's half of the business. It was a fair offer, generous even, considering the circumstances. My dad's lawyer reviewed it and nodded. "We accept," he said. But Richard held up a hand. "There's one more condition," he said, looking directly at my father for the first time. "The entire buyout amount won't be paid to you, Mark. $20,000 of it is going to be wired directly to Lily's university to cover her first semester tuition and fees. Non-negotiable." My father's head snapped up. His eyes, full of venom, locked on me. He thought this was my doing, another power play. But I was just as stunned as he was. I looked at Richard, my mouth hanging open. "You can't do that," my dad protested. "That's my money." "Actually," Richard said, his voice calm and cold as steel, "it's the company's money. It's the money you should have been putting away for your daughter all along instead of funneling it into your side project. Consider it a long overdue withdrawal from the bank of Dad. And since you've proven yourself incapable of making responsible deposits, I'm just facilitating the transaction." He slid the revised agreement across the table. "Sign it, Mark. Or we decline the buyout, dissolve the firm entirely, and you can explain to your pregnant girlfriend why your half of the company is now worth zero." Checkmate. There was nowhere for him to go. He couldn't afford to lose the buyout. Defeated, he scribbled his signature on the paper, his hand shaking with rage. I walked out of that office feeling like I could breathe for the first time in months. The wire transfer went through the next day. I was officially a fully paid-up college student. As I packed my bags for the dorm, my mom came into my room. She was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Richard is a good man," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. A few months into my first semester, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture of a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The text below it read, "This is your sister, Olivia. I got your tuition money back. Now we're even. Don't contact me again." It was from Chloe. I looked at the picture of the tiny, innocent baby and felt a strange mix of pity and relief. Chloe had gotten what she wanted from my father, and in her own way, she had made amends with me. She was cutting her losses just like everyone else. I deleted the message. I saw my father one more time, months later when he came to the house with my mom to sign the final divorce papers. He looked older, smaller. He tried to talk to me, to apologize again. "I miss you, Lilybug," he said, his voice cracking. I looked at the man who had almost destroyed my future, who had broken my mother's heart, who had tried to blackmail me with a picture of my own mom. The love I once had for him was gone, replaced by a hollow ache. "I know," I said, and it was the truth. I missed the dad he used to be, the family we once were, but that man and that family were gone forever. Goodbye, Dad. I closed the door, not on him, but on that chapter of my life. I had my education, my mother had her freedom and a new, kinder partner in Richard, and I had a future that I had fought for, tooth and nail. It wasn't the perfect, easy road I had envisioned on that happy day I got my acceptance letter. It was a path forged through betrayal, fury, and a strength I never knew I had, but it was mine. And for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that no one could ever take it away from me again.